I hear the same complaint. Father Joe and Sally O'Connell want to ride their bicycle built for two in the bicycle race, and they can never do it because of this. So, you know, maybe next year we could just arrange that for them. Okay, so I understand everything tends to come together in the spring because it is such a beautiful time of the year. And of course, one of the highlights of every year is First Holy Communion, which is going to be on Saturday, May the 16th here in our parish. Our friends from Precious Blood have it today at one of their masses. Our friends from St. Sebastian's had it yesterday, and we're so happy that they could all join us today. Very wonderful of you to support this endeavor. But First Holy Communion is a happy time in the life of every parish. And of course, before you have First Holy Communion, you have First Confessions. And I had First Confessions recently. We all were hearing. We have 86 children making First Communion on the 16th of May. And we've got these, Nellie, our DRE, made these beautiful little name tags, and they're up on the St. Joseph's altar. You can take one and pray for that child. Okay? And of course, so many of you here are the catechists who have prepared them. Margaret and Gina and Gilma helps, and Sally has been doing this for about 5 million years, more or less. And Nada Sr. helps us. Nada Jr. fills in when she can. And of course, Mary Ann is ever faithful, and we're so grateful to you, Mary, and we keep your mom in our prayers. We're glad you could be with us today. But I think many of you have helped with that in so many ways. So our First Communion children are really gearing up. I had First Confessions recently, and one little girl brought her little brother in, and she plops him down in the chair, and she says, and I said, does he need to make his confession? She says, confession? He needs to go to jail. So I guess it depends on your perspective, you know? People come to me with things like that. I have those kind of conversations all the time. A lady came in not too long ago. She said, Father, I want to make my funeral arrangements. So I said, well, okay. She goes, well, I want to be cremated. And I said, well, that's okay, but you have to be interred. We should have a mass, and you have to be interred the same way a body would be. She said, well, Father, I want my ashes to be sprinkled at Walmart. I said, Walmart? Why do you want that? She says, that's the only way I know my daughters will come to visit me every week.
Oh, that's a good one.
Of course, her husband was no bargain. He got a new hearing aid. And he went out with a couple of his buddies for a walk. So the three of them went and got their hearing aids together. So they're taking a walk. So they're walking down the block, and one says to the other, he says, it's windy, isn't it? And the other one says, no, it's Thursday. And the third one says, me too, let's go have a drink. You really have to listen to people if you really want to know what's on their mind. Okay? And really learning to be a good listener is not just a human skill, it's also a very important Christian skill, because God made us as individual people who need to relate to each other, not as objects, not as a means to an end, but as persons. Because deep buried within each one of us, even me, is the image of God. And He wants us to relate to each other in that way, as people who really relate to each other. And I want to spend a few minutes this morning speaking to you about how we do that. By the way, I want to thank Margaret for inviting me to be the speaker this year. I know I'm following in the footsteps of Deacon Chris, who spoke last year, and we all know he'll be ordained a priest on June 27th, which is a wonderful thing, right? I don't know if we're going to get any tickets for that or not. We haven't been told yet, but we keep them in your prayers for June the 27th. I was not, I understand, the first choice as a speaker today. They wanted to get Ronald McDonald, but he's working in the kitchen today. And then they thought they would try to get a little bit of luck from the lotto commercials on the radio and the TV, you know. They thought it would be good for the next trip to Atlantic City, but he was unavailable. And then they tried to get the Gecko Geico, but he has a policy. He doesn't like to make appearances in restaurants because he's afraid they're going to fricassee him. So they got me. So here I am. And but as I was saying, the Lord puts us here so that we can truly relate to each other as individuals made in His image and likeness, and that we can approach each other that way, which is the basis for all charity. That we want to treat other people the way we would like to be treated. Why? Because we're all made in God's image, even when we're having a bad day, okay? Which happens a lot, you know, let's face it. But being willing to look for the gem inside each person is part of what it means to be a Christian, to really try to find the image of God in the other person. And Pope Francis has come up with a wonderful way of talking about that. He says that we shouldn't just meet people, we should encounter people. An encounter would mean really meeting them person to person, not as thing to thing or task to task or even enemy to enemy, but person to person. That's what an encounter is. And one of the big messages of his leadership in the church is try to encourage us, all as members of the church, to really create what he calls a culture of encounter within the church. That we encounter each other not as liberals or conservatives or as traditionalists or modernists or as even as of different divisions of the church, but rather as people made in the image of God, and trying to find that common point of view about faith. And one way we do that is by really revealing ourselves in some way, by telling our story. Many of you know that I've been having a lot of meetings over the last 4 months with individuals, and my committee, my wonderful campaign committee, has been meeting with individuals for the capital campaign. So the process is you meet with your major donors individually, and then you conduct group meetings and so forth. And I've had many, many meetings, and my committee members have had many, many meetings. And frankly, I mean, we're asking for them to contribute. Well, the very interesting thing is that in so many, many of those meetings, many of which I had with many of you sitting here today, that it became more than just the leader speaking to somebody who could do a job. That it became a sharing of a story. And it was so interesting for me to really find that these conversations changed from, so to speak, a business meeting into an encounter. Because people would share with me their story, their history, their life of faith. If I'm coming to them speaking about the needs of the church, and so often they were revealing to me what the church has meant to them. It became a real encounter. That's something that I can say truly and really happened in a beautiful way. And nobody likes asking for money, that's for sure. But I am glad I had the chance to talk to people, and that it got onto this deeper level of really encountering each other in a spirit of faith. It was really a beautiful thing to experience. And what I want to say to you today is that that can happen in many areas of life. It can happen when we go to each other, perhaps to organize an event like this. It can happen perhaps when we deal with the next meeting of the Rosary. It can happen when we are on the bus on our way to the Poconos or Atlantic City. It can happen over the backyard fence when we have to figure out who's going to pay to get the sewer pipe repaired under the sidewalk. All of these business transactions can and should, in a way, become encounters of two human beings. One made in the image of God, the other made in the image of God, both of whom are here in order to bring forth the will of God in a deeper and more meaningful way. Maybe that's the kind of encounter we need to have sometimes with even members of our own family. Sometimes that can be the hardest, okay? Because we have a long history and we have memories and we have perhaps legitimate complaints and so forth. Really to encounter the other person as made in the image of God might open up a door that perhaps has been closed for many years. I just want to close with a quotation from Pope Francis, where he speaks about the fact that if we really encounter each other as people, that's the thing that can bring us real joy. This is what Pope Francis says. True joy does not come from things or from possessing. No, it is born from the encounter, from the relationship with others. It is born from feeling accepted, understood, and loved, and from accepting, understanding, and loving. This is not because of a passing fancy, but because the other one is a person. Joy is born from the gratuitousness of an encounter. It is hearing someone say, but not necessarily with words, "You are important to me." This, the Pope says, is beautiful. And it is these very words that God makes us understand. In calling you, God says to you, "You are important to me. I love you. I am counting on you." Jesus says this to each one of us. Joy is born from that. The joy of the moment in which Jesus looked at me. Understanding and hearing this is the secret of our joy. Feeling loved by God, feeling that for Him we are not numbers, but people, and hearing Him calling us. So the Pope is encouraging us, first of all, to have an encounter with the Lord, and then open ourselves to have an encounter with each other in the same way, who are also made in the image and likeness of God. And if we do that, we can really experience the joy that Christ wants us to have. Even if we can't ride in the bicycle race next year, we can still encounter the joy of encountering each other the way God wants to encounter us. God bless you.